Good afternoon. This is GE6100, Understanding the Self. Today's topic is about learning to be a better student. So, the following are the learning outcomes. At the end of the module, we're expected to define learning, know the three basic types of learning, learn the qualities of a successful student, learn how to become better students. Let's start with the definition of what is learning. Learning is an adaptive function wherein the nervous system is changed by stimuli in the environment, creating behavioral responses that permits people to function in the environment or society. Also, learning is a change in knowledge or behavior that arises out of our experiences. There are three main types or basic types of learning. These are the classical conditioning, the operant conditioning, and the observational learning. Associative learning encompasses both classical and operant conditioning, wherein associations are made between events that occur together. However, observational learning, on the other hand, is learning by observing others. Classical conditioning is a type of learning that happens unconsciously. So when you learn through classical conditioning, an automatic conditioned responses is paired with a specific stimulus, and this creates a behavior. And the best knowing example of this is from what some believe to be the father of classical conditioning, Ivan Pavlov. In an experiment on canine digestion, he found that over time, dogs were salivating not only when their food was presented to them, but when the people who fed them arrived. And to test his theory that the dogs were salivating because they were associating the people with being fed, he began ringing a bell and then presenting the food. So the dog would associate the sound with food. And these dogs learn to associate the bell ringing with food, causing their mouths to salivate whenever the bell rang, not just when they encounter the food. Conditioning is beneficial in an evolutionary sense because it helps us create expectations to prepare for future events. For instance, getting ill from a certain food helps us associate that food with sickness. So, in turn, that helps prevent us from getting sick in the future. And, we're all exposed to classical conditioning in one way or another throughout our lives. And like in our day to day, advertisers often used to use it to push their products. For example, beauty commercials use actors with clear, smooth skin to lead consumers to associate their products with healthy skin. The operant conditioning, which is sometimes referred to as an instrumental conditioning, is a method of learning that employs rewards and punishments for behaviors. And so, through operant conditioning, an association is made between a behavior and a consequence. Well, whether negative or positive for that behavior. For example, the laboratory rats press a lever when a green light is on. They receive a food pellet as a reward. And when they press the lever when a red light is on, they receive a mild electric shock. So as a result, they learn to press the lever when the green light is on and avoid the red light. But the operant conditioning is not just something that takes place in experimental settings while training lab animals. It also plays a powerful role in our everyday learning. Reinforcement and punishment take place in natural settings all the time, as well as in more structured settings such as classroom or therapy sessions. Actually, the operant conditioning was first described by behaviorist B.F. Skinner, which is why you may occasionally hear it referred to as Skinnerian conditioning. As a behaviorist, Skinner believed that it was not really necessary to look at internal thoughts and motivation in order to explain behavior. And so instead, he suggested we should look only at the external, the observable causes of human behavior. Also, Edwin Thorndike, a psychologist, proposed what he called the law of effects, that according to his principle, actions that are followed by desirable outcomes are more likely to be repeated, while those followed by undesirable outcomes are less likely to be repeated. And so operant conditioning relies on simple premise. These are actions that are followed by reinforcement will be strengthened and more likely to occur again in the future. For example, if you tell a funny story in class and everybody laughs, you will probably be more likely to tell the story again in the future. For example, you as a student, you raise your hand to ask a question, and then your teacher praises your polite behavior. And then so you will be more likely to raise your hand the next time you have a question or comment, because your behavior was followed by reinforcement or a desirable outcome. The that the preceding action is strengthened, but actions that result punishment or undesirable consequences will be weakened and less likely to occur again in the future. If you tell the same story again in another class, but nobody laughs this time, then you will be less likely to repeat the story again in the future. Now, if you shout out an answer in class and your teacher scolds you, then you might be less likely to interrupt the class again. The next one is the observational learning. It is actually the process of learning by watching others, retaining the information, and then later replicating the behaviors that were observed. And there are a number of learning theories, such as classical conditioning, as we mentioned, operant conditioning, that emphasize how direct experience, enforcement, or punishment can lead to learning. However, a great deal of learning happens indirectly. For example, think about how a child may watch adults waving at one another, and then imitates these actions later on. A tremendous amount of learning happens through this process. So in psychology, this is referred to as observational learning. Observational learning is sometimes called shaping modeling. While it can take place at any point in life, it tends to be the most common during the childhood. It is also plays an important role in the socialization process, because in observational learning, children learn how to behave and respond to others by observing how their parents or their caregivers or with other people. Psychologist Alex Bandura is the researcher most often associated with learning through observation. He demonstrated that we are naturally inclined to engage in observational learning. And so studies suggest that imitation with social understanding tends to begin around 2 years old, but will vary depending on the specific child. In the Bubudal experiments by Bandura, he demonstrated that young children may imitate the aggressive actions of an adult model. So children observed a film where an adult repeatedly hit a large inflatable balloon doll and then had the opportunity to play with the same doll later on. And so children were more likely to imitate the adult's violent actions when the adult either received no consequences or when the adult was rewarded. And children who saw the adult being punished for this aggressive behavior were less likely to imitate them. Now, let's move on to the qualities of a successful student. And here are Some like make your studies your number one priority. This is your season. You are a student, and that's why you are called a student. You are enrolled to a particular course or program. And so you are expected to make your studies your number one priority. Otherwise, if you are called an employee, then you are expected to do the work of an employee. But then again, you are in a season that you are tagged as a student, and so you are expected to make your studies your number one priority. Another one, be punctual, not only in going to class so as not to be late, but to get the most out of learning in the discussion or activities. Of course, when you say be punctual, this also pertains to submission of homeworks, projects. Be honest. Do not cheat. Cheating will do you no good. Stay focused and avoid distraction. Pay attention in class, focus on your task, avoid being distracted by social media, avoid being distracted by other people, even they are good looking. Do not be distracted with the people that seem to be brighter and more intelligent. Just be the best that you can be. Set achievable incremental progress. Work on improving each and every step of the way, even if it would be small steps. Get excited about going to school, about the discussions, about the activities and knowledge that you will gain. And so here are also some of tips to become better students. So you might want to write it down, be organized. So you write down the important due dates or deadlines, get a good night's sleep before tests or examinations, avoid procrastination, study for a set amount of time each weekday or every day, take notes in class, have a positive attitude because complaining will only make learning harder. So be positive. Of course, you pray, read. Reading good books will increase your comprehension or vocabulary. Eat the right proportion size of food during breakfast and lunch and dinner. And so, yeah, that's it. That's all about the topic for today, learning to be a better student.